Unexplained Mysteries, The Truth Behind the Shroud of Turin, Giants, Nephilim, and the Book of Enoch. The Giants.
Timothy Alberino.
By this elderly woman who told Steve that she needs to talk to his son because her son has an incredible story to tell.
Okay.
And her son didn't want to come forward. He really didn't want to talk about this, but his mom eventually convinced him to tell the story to Steve Quayle. And it turns out that her son was, at the time we talked to him, was a C-130 pilot, active duty.
Okay.
And so after telling Steve this remarkable story, we decided to fly him into Bozeman, Montana, where our studio was, and to interview him for our upcoming documentary film. We were making a series of films called the True Legends documentary film series.
Yeah.
And primarily these films centered around the topic of giants. So this individual whose name I'm not going to, he didn't want us to use his name. In fact, we had to interview him in silhouette. He didn't want his image to be out there either.
He's still active duty.
He was active duty. Yeah. And he came and he showed us his credentials. We met him and we were very impressed by his candor and his credentials. Clearly active duty, C-130 pilot. Very experienced guy. He'd flown many missions in Afghanistan. And he related to us the following story.
Okay.
So back in 2005, the pilot, I'm going to just refer to him as the pilot, he was running missions into Afghanistan for the Air Force, and his job was picking up cargo, what he described as high-value assets or high-value cargo.
Yeah.
Usually it was Taliban guys. And this is in 2005, so this is early on in the conflict.
In the scope of 20 years.
In the scope of 20 years. This is the beginning of the conflict, really.
Yeah.
And so he would occasionally fly in, routinely, fly into Bagram Airfield, pick up Taliban guys. So they called him in for a mission. And like all his other missions, he flew in, and it's kind of dangerous coming down into Bagram. I won't go into all those details, but those are not easy missions to fly. He flies into Bagram Airfield, and he thinks this is just a routine mission. He and his crew, at least his load master, I don't know if he had anyone else, but he definitely had a load master. And he deplanes, but this time, unlike other times, he's met on the tarmac by some very interesting individuals. He believed that they were Army or Air Force intelligence.
Okay.
He described them as the babysitters, or referred to them as the babysitters. Because as soon as he deplaned, they said, this never happened, highly classified, don't ever talk about this. And he'd been picking up high-value assets rather, and this was the first time he was met on the tarmac. So he knew, okay, whatever this is top secret. So they escort him over to the hangar, he and his loadmaster, and as they're approaching the hangar, they see a pallet, and there's this Air Force pallet, and then there's this tarp covering something on the pallet, and there's a couple of soldiers standing around the pallet. And he said the first thing that he noticed was a very strong odor.
Okay.
He was met with this intense odor, and it was a mix of like body odor and death.
Okay.
And it was really musky. It was very, very strong. So he got the sense that there's something dead under that tarp. And as they approached the tarp, he saw that there was, it looked like a guy was under the tarp. And as it turned out, it was a guy. It was a very large guy under this tarp. And he was so large, he was in the fetal position, that his feet and head were hanging off the pallet. So his feet and his hands and his head were hanging out of the tarp, sort of hanging off the pallet, part of his head. And these pallets are 9 feet long.
Yeah.
These cargo pallets. And he's in the fetal position. Okay, so immediately the pilot is struck with the reality that this is a giant.
So he would have been 10, 11, 12 feet.
10 to 12 feet tall.
Okay. Okay.
Probably more on the 12-foot tall side. And when he walked up to this body, of course, he was astounded. he said the babysitters were there, standing there, the intelligence guys, and then there was a couple of what he thought were Marines sort of guarding this cargo.
Yeah.
And he engaged obviously in conversation with him, like, what the heck is this thing?
Yeah.
And they told him that they didn't know exactly where it had come from,
Yeah.
but this is what they heard, and this is what they related to him. They said that this gigantic being had been killed in a cave out in the desert of Afghanistan, out in the mountains. And that there was a team of soldiers who were deployed out there, probably special ops guys at this time, this early on,
Yeah.
who were out there doing reconnaissance.
A deep dive into what the giants look like.
Humanoid under this tarp. And he said the guy was like a brick. He was like pure muscle. He said he didn't know if it was rigor mortis that had set in after death, but he said you could see his hands and his feet. He was very muscular, very large and muscular. And he said that the giant's feet, which were wrapped in very crude footwear, like a canvas type thing, the giant's feet and hands had 6 digits instead of 5.
Okay.
So it's 6 fingers and 6 toes on each hand and foot. The giant's skin was a pale white. Again, he wasn't sure if it was because the giant had been dead for a couple of days or if that was the natural tone of the skin. But what really stood out to him was the red hair. The giant had red or auburn hair.
Huh.
And again, there was a very pungent odor coming off of this thing. To weigh this cargo, obviously, before they put it on the C-130. So the loadmaster weighed it. It was 1,500 pounds. Now, that's including the pallet. Subtracting the pallet, this dude weighed 1,100 pounds. So we're talking about a 12-foot guy that weighs 1,100 pounds.
Let's explore why giants appear like that.
And this could either appear as having pale skin and red or blonde hair. The reason why the vampiric Nephilim chose to remain in hiding after the Titan Wars, and for the most part, after the Great Flood, is actually related to their blood drinking, which can trigger a variety of biological responses, such as porphyria, and this condition results in a buildup of porphyrins in the bone marrow. And these porphyrins make their way to the skin, which causes massive sensitivity to sunlight, which can cause the cartilage on the ears and the noses to be lost due to damage, and can also cause other affected body parts like the fingers to be lost due to severe burns. And porphyria also sometimes causes hypertrichosis, which protects any skin that's exposed to sunlight. So vampiric Nephilim would only be able to go out at night comfortably, and they would attempt to acquire blood to feed on while safely hidden from the sun. Long-term iron overload would result in organ damage, especially to the liver and the skin, and this would make the effects of porphyria permanent, which is why even though the bodies of the vampiric Nephilim would have adjusted to regular blood consumption over time, they would still have to avoid sunlight for the rest of their very long lives, or else they might physically face the consequences of severe burns. And the avoidance of sunlight would have negative consequences on their offspring over generations, especially if the blood drinking habits were passed down generationally. Iron overload can cause iron to accumulate in the skin cells. In non-albino people, this can trigger the overproduction of melanocytes, causing a more bronze appearance. But in people with lower melanin production rates, their skin instead develops a silvery or slate gray appearance, which would explain why many of the different types of creatures that people have cited often have gray skin. Other creatures have been depicted as having green skin, which indicates that they have excessive biliverdin in their blood, which can be a symptom of anemia, as I had mentioned in a previous video in regard to the green children of Pulpit. But iron overload can also have anemic symptoms, including jaundice and hyperbilirubinemia. So excessive iron consumption could also contribute to a greenish appearance, since iron overload can cause damage to the liver, which reduces its ability to remove biliverdin and bilirubin from the blood. and various different types of skin discoloration that could be caused by iron overload anemia or hemochromatosis is seen in many of the larger-sized people depicted in older mythological texts, especially the figures who were associated with blood sacrifices. This is another reason as to why vampires are mistakenly believed to be undead, because their skin often has a gray hue due to hemochromatosis, as a result of their body's response to hematophagy. It's well known that cave animals tend to not have pigmentation, and the reason why is because there's a selective pressure for those with less melanin to survive. And the reason why is because producing melanin requires a substantial amount of energy from the body, which burns calories. And so this can actually be detrimental in conditions where food is not abundant, but only if melanin is not necessary. Because not having melanin makes the skin very sensitive to sunlight, and also prone to skin cancer, which is what happened to Snowflake the albino gorilla, even though his zookeepers gave him sunscreen daily. Over generations of sunlight avoidance, similar selective pressures would have affected the descendants of the lesser vampiric Nephilim, and this could either appear as having pale skin and red or blonde hair, or it could express itself as albinism. And this lack of melanin would cause a positive feedback loop of avoiding sunlight and facing more selective pressures for having less melanin. People with albinism tend to have the same physical traits that vampires typically have, being pale skin, white hair, and bright red eyes. And the reason why is because they have no melanin to tint their skin, hair, or eyes. The reason why their eyes are often red is because they have no melanin to tint their irises. And so the reason why they appear to be red is because you're actually seeing their blood vessels. And if a person who has albinism were to also have jaundice, and therefore a buildup of bilirubin in their blood, then their blood would appear to be yellow, and therefore their skin and their eyes would appear to be yellow, hence why many vampires are depicted as having yellow eyes. The reason why vampires are said to have cold skin could actually be because of a trait that's shared with other organisms that have negligible or negative senescence. There have been some different types of mammals which were actually cold-blooded, such as the Myotragus bulgaricus goat and the naked mole rat. And in mammals, this is called poikilothermy. And poikilothermy is an adaptation to living in low-resource environments. It also happens to be a trait that negligible or negatively senescent organisms share in common. Poikilothermic organisms have a lower metabolism than warm-blooded animals, and this makes it so that they can survive significantly longer, even without access to food. Both vampiric and non-vampiric Nephilim are said to be immortal, indicating that they have negligible or negative senescence, which means that they were also likely to have been poikilothermic, hence their colder skin. There are other traits that are commonly associated with vampires, such as sharp teeth and pointed ears. It is entirely possible for people to be born with these traits, even just randomly. And these mutations are heritable, so they can be passed on to offspring, such as in the case of hypohidrotic ectodermal dysplasia. People with this condition tend to have sharp teeth due to a lack of enamel, and they also generally don't grow adult teeth. And so their initial pointed teeth are permanent. And while their teeth can be fixed by a dentist, if they don't receive treatment, then their teeth remain pointed into adulthood. And the hair that they do have tends to be very sparse and falls out easily. And another interesting feature is that they usually have no sweat glands. A condition like hypohidrotic ectodermal dysplasia would actually be useful for stealth, either for hunting or hiding. Back in the 17th and 18th centuries in Japan, the shinobi ninjas avoided eating foods that had a strong aroma to prevent their bodies from having any detectable scent, including from their sweat, so that they would be able to sneak up on their targets without being detected. Those among the cave-dwelling vampiric lesser Nephilim who may have lacked sweat glands would be able to survive longer by evading detection and be able to hunt and hide more effectively because of a lack of body odor, since they had no sweat glands. And they would pass down these traits to their offspring, making it so that the absence of sweat pores and other mutations along the same genetic pathway would be more common in their respective populations over the generations. Hence why some types of Nephilim, who had descended from the same bloodlines, have the same traits. Of course, I'm not saying that all people with this condition are descendants of Nephilim or cave dwellers. Hypohydrotic ectodermal dysplasia can affect other species too, aside from humans, and might be more prevalent in certain isolated populations of other species, such as the descendants of the Nephilim, who had survived in some regions. Many descendants of the Nephilim that people have encountered throughout history, which tended to also be vampiric, in some cases seem to also have hypohydrotic ectodermal dysplasia, or a similar genetic condition. And other isolated populations of Nephilim descendants have other physical traits that were passed down throughout their respective isolated populations, with some offspring resembling trolls, and others having larger eyes and frailer bodies, and some resembling Bigfoot or dogmen based on their genetic makeup. The Nephilim didn't always have only human and angel DNA. Oftentimes they also had animal DNA too. There are certain non-human entities that have been encountered, and the traits that they're described as having are consistent with what would be expected of cave-dwelling, hematophagous organisms. The typical gray aliens have large eyes, which are consistent with the characteristics that animals living in low-light environments have. Nocturnal animals like owls and felines have larger retinal orbits, and in some cases their pupils span the entire visible surface of their retinas in order to maximize their light absorption. And long-term avoidance of light could actually cause an atrophy of the iris sphincter muscle, and this would make it to where their pupils are unable to constrict properly, which would explain why these creatures have large black eyes, because of their living in low-light environments long-term. Sometimes in lighter environments, light enters into their eyes and bounces back off of their retinas, which makes their eyes appear to glow red. And other humanoids, like the Hopkinsville goblins and the Pleiadians, are also described as having larger than normal eyes, and they're also described as having albinism and jaundice. And these goblin-like creatures that are called aliens also are described as having gray skin, which again is an indication of hemochromatosis due to excess iron consumption. Many aliens are also described as having green skin, similar to goblins, which, as I had mentioned earlier, is an indication that they have a buildup of biliverdin in their blood, which is a symptom of iron overload anemia, as well as acquired refractory iron deficiency anemia, which can be caused by a shutdown of heme synthesis and could be acquired as a response to the overconsumption of heme. And the chupacabra was described as having a similar appearance to aliens. If these creatures are emerging from caves, such as one of the many caves in Puerto Rico, this would explain how they're able to emerge suddenly and then go back into hiding. Unlike the previously mentioned Nephilim descendants that did not have sweat glands, other types, such as the chupacabra and the creatures cited in Varginha, Brazil, still did have sweat pores, and were described as having a very strong odor. Blood contains high amounts of amino acids and nitrogenous waste products, which a blood-drinking creature would excrete out in the form of ammonia. And this is the most likely to occur with a diet that's very high in amino acids and low in carbs and fats, because ammonia is a byproduct of amino acid breakdown. And blood is very high in amino acids, which the body can readily use as a food source and even convert into glucose using gluconeogenesis, and fats through lipogenesis. If these creatures consume blood as their primary food source, that would explain why their jaws are so small, because the muscles in their jaws are undeveloped due to not being used. since they don't have to chew blood, similar to the jaw shrinkage and malocclusion that humans experienced during the agricultural revolution.
Let's review more evidence of giants.
It seems like we have just found what could be the bodies of the giants that existed in the biblical times. In the Old Testament of the Bible, it actually says the giants did actually exist in this world before God decided to flood the entire earth. And now it seems like we might have actually found these giants. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but you guys need to stick around with me because there is a solid proof that brings into evidence that all of these biblical scriptures are indeed true. Now, I don't know if you guys know about how some of these massive mountains that actually resembles like the body of a giant. Take a look at this video right here. It's going to give you a lot more explanation as to what I'm speaking about.
Some people in Northern Europe were surprised when they found a very strange rock. I don't know what kind of stone it is, but its color is very similar to flesh and blood. Legend has it that it is the flesh of petrified giants. Because it was not suitable to exist in the New Age, God destroyed them, and they turned to stone. These rocks look.
And by the way, if you take a look at these rocks, these are like the chunk of rocks that are cut down from these mountains, which actually looks like a massive giant. And tell me, how does this not look like a chunk of meat itself? Because to be honest, this looks like a mixture of muscle and fat. And this literally looks like a lamb steak, to be honest.
Nothing more than chunks of meat.
Wow, look at that stuff. This literally looks like a rotten meat, man.
Not only that, people also discovered rocks with strange shapes, such as human faces and bodies. The mountains look like human muscles. Do you believe there are giants turned to stone in the world?
So this is what I was talking about in my previous video, where there's a mountain that literally looks like a snake's head, and it also has scales on it. Look at this stuff. This looks like a woman because after thousands of years, maybe the bodies just turned into mountains due to nature taking its course. And then a perfect body of a female, and we got like the legs right here, looks exactly like a petrified giant.
Out this video how people are claiming that these Himalayan mountains used to be some kind of giants and that this pink salt looks a lot like flesh and blood.
Exactly. So these are present in the Himalayan mountains, and there are many different mountains in Himalayas that actually looks like a giant that's fallen. So it literally has the shape of an actual giant itself. And they started breaking down these mountains in order to dig and see what they find out inside. And they discovered that there are Himalayan salt that's present inside these mountains. And this is basically what the Himalayan salt looks like. So they just go in there, they start mining, getting a chunk of the salt, and then they convert that into salt that's being sold out there in retail. But this is apparently what it looks like. It looks exactly like a human meat for some reason.
From a being.
On petrified giants, whatever happened to them most probably happened fast and simultaneously. Now, do I believe that they are 100% petrified? And the answer is yes and no. If giants are real, like the Bible, Dead Sea Scrolls, and other literature
that looks like a
defines,
face.
they were not born of the same flesh like me and you, so I think they were only stopped but not destroyed. And these pink salt mines and these flesh-looking stones are part of their bodies harvested from the earth. And for us to deny the similarities that this was once...
That literally looks like a meat, man. This is basically how I get my chickens. That looks so much like a meat.
some living tissue. When pictures and video show
Wow.
layer...
Wow. Oh my God. This is exactly how a proper pork chop looks like. Like, look at this stuff, man. This is like the muscle, and then there's like perfect fat area that just adds in. And just take a look at what an actual meat would look like. And this is what they found out in the Himalayan salt that we are... And this is what they found out once they cut down these mountains. They actually look exactly like the meat itself.
by layer the truth.
That is insane. We also got another video right here.
I'm pretty sure these salt mines are dead giants. Y'all cannot tell me these salt mines are not dead giants. Bruh, this looks like
Look
chunks
at that,
of meat.
man.
Are y'all kidding?
Wow, this is like the perfect example right here. This right here is like the upper skin, and then we've got like the fat, and then we've got like the full meat, like the muscle part in here. And no wonder it tastes salty, man, because this is what Himalayan salt is all about. We're probably consuming the giants in the name of salt.
Me right now. This looks like bacon or pork chops. This
Exactly.
is salt from the mine. This looks like blood. Look at it. Look! This looks like the inside of a body.
Now, I went on to Google and I tried to find out what the actual Himalayan salts look like once they extract it. And would you believe it if I said that this was not a chunk of pork meat? This is actual Himalayan salt. And this literally is what it looks like. And this right here is another image of what the Himalayan salt looks like. There are like each layers of like these flesh that are being formed. And obviously these giants were not born as humans, right? So that's probably why their bodies were not like completely decayed. And that is because they were born when humans and angels mated, when the fallen angels mated. So that's basically how these things were created, and probably why their bodies were never decayed, but then they were dead. This right here is another image. This literally looks like a juicy pork steak, man. And this right here is how the Himalayan salts are like harvested, and apparently they just keep mining inside these mountains, and it looks like an actual body of a giant, and basically trying to extract these salts. And tell me how this does not look like inside of a being that has been alive, like an actual body itself. Now, there is also a mountain which actually has a pathway that looks like a massive giant was just fallen, in which the entire city was built on.
If you needed further proof,
look at this stuff,
that we live on the remains of a much larger past.
Wow, this is what the Himalayan salt mountains look like.
It's nothing more than hardened biology. Let's take a look at where a trendy and popular ingredient you might have in your cabinet came from. Himalayan salt. You tell me what these caves look like. Let's take a look at some of that salt.
The best part about these Himalayan salt are like they kind of just have a glow to it. Look at that stuff. They kind of glow in the dark. I don't know why.
Taken out of these mines and collected into a pile.
Wow. Look at these things, man. They look like a chunk of meat being sold out.
Now, do those not look like slabs of meat or what? Here's a closer picture of one. How about now? If pork ribs aren't your cut of choice, don't worry. There's many.
No freaking way. Is this like the Himalayan salt? Wow.
The other cuts to choose from here. In the right conditions, after a great flood-like event, buried and covered in sediment, these petrified beings became the new mountains and hillsides of this realm. If you aren't convinced, let's do a few more side-by-sides. You got rock and meat. One of my favorites, you got
Dude,
bacon.
That is bacon.
And you got bacon rock. History is nothing more than a set of lies agreed upon. And the same goes for most all of academia. The truth.
This is the Himalayan salt that they just cut down into blocks. That looks like a chunk of meat that's being cut
is
down.
In the hillsides and in the mountains, hidden in plain sight. Question everything, friends. Until next time.
That is true, man. I think we should actually start questioning each and everything that happens around the world. And it seems like someone is just trying to keep us in the silence. They don't want us to know the truth. We have just found what is known to be the biblical trees that existed before the Great Flood. And these are the trees that God intended to cut it down so that the giants don't use the tree in order to escape the great Noah's flood. Now take a look at this right here.
This is a giant tree cut down by the angels. God made multiple giant trees like this.
Wow.
But he had to cut them down because he was going to flood the earth, and the angels and the giants were going to try to hide on these trees. So therefore he had to cut them down with angels. And that's what he did.
Now, before we dive into like the actual story of this tree and how this was cut into half, let's take a look at this footage right here.
This is a giant tree that angels cut down in the name of the Lord, so that way the Nephilim could not hide when Noah's, the floods came, and they were going to try to hide up on top of these trees and get away from the flood. And there's multiple other trees just like this all around the world, but they don't want to admit that because Satan rules this world, and it brings you back to Christ. You read the Bible, the book of Enoch, it all talks about this stuff, but they don't want you to know this.
A huge shout out to Ryan Murphy on Instagram for making this video. And apparently there are many trees that was actually cut down by the angels that God sent sent down to earth before like the great flood, the Noah's flood, because it seems like the giants, the Nephilims who lived on earth, were capable enough to climb this massive tree and probably survive the great flood. Now what's funny is that obviously our government, being the government, they named this place as the Devil's Tower for some reason. And the government obviously says that this is just a mountain. What's interesting is that there are plenty of different sites that looks exactly the same way, and it actually looks like a chunk of tree that's been cut down. And if you actually take a look at the size of this thing, it was at least supposed to be about 2 miles all the way up in the sky, and that's how huge these trees were before it was cut down. And this right here is another image so that you guys can take a look at what it actually looked like and tell me that this doesn't look like an actual tree that is intentionally being sawed down. Now this is basically what the site looks like, and if you compare this with like an actual chunk of wood, this is how the roots of an actual tree looks like. And the best example that I can give is that if you take a look at this tree that's been cut down, this looks exactly as what this mountain looks like, and it is massive in size, and it was also mentioned in the scriptures of Enoch. Now unfortunately, the scriptures of Enoch were not included in the Bible because back in those times, the Jews, the Christians, they were not very pleased to hear some of the things that was mentioned in the book of Enoch, and they did not want to include those things in the Bible itself. Some of the things that were said in the book of Enoch is actually crazy because it talks about the angels, it talks about the great Noah's flood and what happened during those floods and before the flood. Now guys, take a look at this image right here. Tell me, how in the world does it even look like it's just a mountain? It's a very clear representation of what an actual tree would have looked like. And this right here is like the stiffness of the roots of the tree that just went all the way up, but then it was cut down, it was sawn down perfectly as though it was done very intentionally by someone. Now in the book of Enoch, it actually says that the angels were sent by God in order to cut down the giant trees before the great Noah's flood happened. And this right here is another image of what the tree actually looks like. If it was fully grown all the way up above, it is said to be about 2 miles that's going to be growing all the way up in the air. So that's a massive tree, to be honest. And if this tree was not cut down, the giants might have probably used the tree in order to climb it up and survive the great flood. And according to the scriptures, that's why God decided to cut it down. Now, there is also another mountain, which the government claims that it is just a mountain, it's not a tree. Now, of course, everything that's run in this world is run by Satan, so he obviously wouldn't want us to know about the truth of this world and the scriptures that's already been said. So the government claims that this is just an average mountain. Now if you take a close look at this, and you actually even have those tree marks right here, like all of these circular wooden marks that keeps appearing, and obviously over thousands of years, if a wood just stays in a single place, the environment is obviously going to be covering up the wood, and it's going to change its properties, and it's going to look more like a forest. Now for example, this is basically what a cut down tree looks like. If you go close up to a tree stump, this is basically what it looks like. It looks like a bunch of mountains, and it looks like there is a massive jungle that's overgrown on this mountain. But this is just a stump of a tree that's been cut down for hundreds of years. Now imagine a tree that was cut down before the pre-flood era, which is thousands of years from now, and tell me, how can this not be the tree that is mentioned in the scriptures? Now there are of course many different sites that actually looks like a massive tree was cut down. One of these examples that I actually came across on Twitter, if you cut down 2 trees that are like overgrown between each other, this is basically what it's going to look like. And that's exactly what these mountains look like as well, which, you know, people actually believe that these are just mountains. And we've got another tree that's been cut down all the way near the roots, and look at this mountain right here. It's been cut down, it's been sliced down in a perfect shape. The same goes on for this one as well. And down here we also have another mountain which also looks like it's been sliced down. And apparently if you go up on the close-up surface of these trees, that the structure has a very close resemblance of what an actual chunk of tree would look like. It has some sort of a honeycomb structure, if you take a close look at what it actually looks like, that are formed above the tree where it was like completely flattened, cut down. And this is one of the reasons as to why many people believe that these were not just some random mountains, and these were the trees that actually existed before the Noah's flood. Take a look at a couple of these images that we've got. There are plenty of different trees where now people are starting to question everything that the government is trying to hide from us. Doesn't this look like the roots of the tree that's like all the way underneath, and then there's like a massive tree that was supposed to be grown, but then it was perfectly chopped down for some reason? All of these looks like it was perfectly chopped down. There is no freaking way this is just a random mountain, and they named it as the Devil's Tower. And this is one of the best ones out there. There is no way anybody out there could say that this is just a random mountain. But obviously they don't want us to know the truth, which is why they haven't been revealing the actual reality of what's going on in the world. They haven't really accepted or mentioned this out there in the public that these are eventually the trees. Like, look at these roots, man. It literally looks like an actual tree. But then the truth is all over the world, but then they just don't show it in the actual social media, or they don't really get to show this on the main news channels. Somebody is trying to hide the truth from us people, and I think we know who that somebody is. And it's very important that we start questioning each and everything that they've been hiding from us. Like Antarctica, for example, and also a part of Great Canyon, which we are not allowed to go ahead and explore for whatever reason that is. It's not because it's dangerous. There are many different parts of the world that's dangerous, but why does the government not allow us to go ahead and explore these locations? What are they hiding in there that they are so afraid that we might eventually find out, due to which they're not allowing any of us humans to even enter that restricted areas? Because that obviously comes down to freedom. If they want to go down and explore Antarctica, I think we should actually have the freedom in order to do so. But then for some reason, they will literally shoot you down if you enter the borders of Antarctica using a boat or a plane. You're just literally not allowed to go in there. So what kind of things are these people hiding? Basically, it leaves us to such a conclusion that we should actually start questioning many things, that they have been falsely lying to us for all these years. Because just imagine what would happen if people will eventually find out, if the entire world finds out and they realize that the scriptures in the Bible was actually the truth, and whatever we know so far is all just bunch of garbage and lies that was being fed to us from all these years. Imagine if everybody in this world finds that out, then this would lead to a massive outbreak where nobody is going to be trusting the government, nobody is going to live anymore in a slave mindset, and the world would basically change and start following God and the scriptures, and they would actually start worshiping God instead of living according to the rules that these people have set so far, because they are probably trying to keep us silent and try to just make us live in a slave mindset. And that's basically what's going on for all these thousands of years. And that is also why they want to just keep us in control, and they don't want us to know the actual truth. And I strongly believe that we should actually start questioning each and everything that we see, and maybe whatever we see in the news, maybe whatever the scientists are saying, those are not the real truth. The scriptures are actually the real truth, and they're just trying to hide it by just labeling each and everything that's in the nature as science and giving some sort of a bullshit explanation to each and everything that we see that happens in a very natural way. They always have some sort of an explanation to each and everything so that we can basically forget what the scriptures are reminding us of. So honestly, man, I hope you guys start questioning these things, and I really hope that this video kind of just enlightened you with some of the information that you might have never known before. And if it did, then please make sure to go ahead, drop a big fat like on this video. It really means a lot to the content. It helps the content get pushed to more people. If you would actually go ahead, drop a like and leave a comment, the algorithm picks those things up as very good positive interaction. So YouTube shows this video to more people, so that more people can actually get to know truth rather than living in lies and, deceptions that we've been living for all these years. So please make sure to go ahead, share this video to as many people as you possibly can. And honestly, let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think about everything that we've discussed in today's podcast? Now, with that being said, if you guys want to stay tuned for more content like these, make sure to go ahead and subscribe. It's absolutely free of cost on YouTube. That's the best part about YouTube. And make sure that you guys are setting your notification settings to all, so that way you don't miss out on the content that I upload every single day. Now, with that being said, hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Till then, take it easy, fams, and goodbye.
Final remarks here are: the Nephilim are real. They still roam among us. The archaeologists described one encounter as a huge red-haired pale skin, which is a consistent appearance as expected for a lesser cave-dwelling Nephilim, whose diet mainly consists of blood due to a lack of other food resources. An appearance matching iron overload anemia or hemochromatosis skin discoloration. No wonder the world's elite invested so much into underground secret bunkers and massive underground tunnel systems, such as the Switzerland bunkers or LA tunnels. They did all of that because they're Nephilim that will burn and suffer in direct sunlight.